So today on the podcast, I have a very, very special guest in an exclusive first ever Irish interview. The man has been through 4,375 episodes on primetime television, a quarter of a century, 25 years. His name is Petrie Hawkins Byrd. How are you doing, man?
Listen, I'm doing great. Let me tell you. Let me give you a big applause right now from me. You pronounced my name right, which is incredible. That is incredible, man. I know that seems like, hey, man, the guy is getting off on his name being pronounced correctly, but I have been introduced in front of thousands of people at different events and had the person pronounce my name wrong. You know,
I think that might have been
people.
it might have been a fluke, is what they call it in Ireland. I got lucky.
Well, I tell you what, man, the Irish eyes are smiling on you right now,
Yeah.
man. You know, you started off great. You know.
I had some great facts and figures in there. I've done my homework today.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. That's great.
Yeah. Before you got on Judge Judy, anyway, like you had a serious background as a bailiff as well. Like, how did it come about that you ended up, say, getting your degree and then becoming like a television star? Really, how did that come about?
Well, okay, so in 1985, I got a job as a court officer in or bailiff, as some folks know it to be, in Brooklyn Family Court. And that was in 85. A year later, I was transferred to Manhattan Family Court, where I worked with many judges, but one judge in particular would prove to be extra special in my life, but I didn't know it at the time. I worked in Manhattan Family Court for 5 years, and then my wife, whom I was married to then, we were separated, and she came out to California. I pursued her, followed her out to California. We reconciled and decided to move out to California. I was in California for 5 years, and I'm sorry, misspoke. I was in California and left law enforcement, and in about 1995, I was working as a high school counselor. I was reading the newspaper, and I happened to come across a name that I recognized, Judge Judy Shineland. And they said that she had written a book, Don't Pee on My Leg and Tell Me It's Raining. And yeah, and so I immediately recognized that this was the Judy Shineland that I once worked with in Manhattan Family Court, and they said that they were developing a TV show for her. I just got excited for her. I wrote her a letter. Hey, Judge, God bless you. I don't think it could happen to a more deserving person. You know, I've always thought you should be on TV. P.S. If you ever need a bailiff, I still look good in uniform. And this was this is supposed to be my little joke, you know, my little attempt at levity. Well, that attempt at levity prompted a phone call from her about 3 weeks after she received the letter. And she called me and she said, "Thank you for your good wishes." She said, "And you might have been kidding at the end of your letter, but we do need a bailiff. We tried it with a regular actor, and because it's an unscripted show, he didn't quite know how to roll with me. She said,
Yeah.
as I can be a little testy about things, and I said, yeah. I said, I know you well. And so she said, well, I think that you would be great on the show. And she said, if I have anything to say about it, I would like to, offer you a job on the show. I was like, hey, yeah, I'll try anything once, And it's funny because I had done acting before. I had done local theater, I had done stand-up comedy, you know. Uh, and so, I was primed and ready. And and so behind that phone call, she told me to where to send a picture and a resume, and I did that. And lo and behold, 6 months later, they flew me down to Southern California, down to LA for my first time, and interviewed me and told me right there on the spot, if you want it, just say yes, and you got the job. I said yes, and that was it, man. The rest, as they say, is total mystery.
Yeah.
I have no idea how it happened.
Did you think at the time when you went into something like that that it would be so popular and last that long?
Whoo, buddy. You know, I think anybody in Hollywood that tells you that they foresee a long career on television or in the movies or in entertainment period, they're generally pulling your leg. They're generally peeing on your leg and telling you it's raining because, man, there's no way to know. And now 25 years later, I'm just I'm just as shocked and dumbfounded as I was, in year two and year five and year 10, you know. After a while, this is the funny part. After a while, I thought we were going to be on forever. I was like, you know, I found myself constantly praying at the airport for her plane to land safely. Please, please. I still have three more house payments.
I
But
can bet. I can bet that those 25 years have absolutely flown by, though.
it's funny. If you measure your life by friendships and by relationships that you developed over the years, um, a lot of my friends in the business and in show business and just my regular everyday friends, um, they've had children, and it's one thing to look at their children when they're first born and see them and go, oh, he's really cute, and then a couple of years later, 2 or 3 years later, you see him as a toddler, and you go, oh, wow, he's really growing. Look at him, look at the little fella. And then one day, the same friend tells you, that their child is getting ready to graduate from college, you
Yeah.
know, or that their child is getting married
Hmm.
or has a child. you know, and then you go, wait a minute, where the years go, man? you
Yeah.
know, like last time I saw him, or the last time, I really connected with him. And there are certain children amongst the staff and the crew on our show, because
Yeah.
we've had staff and crew that have been with us 25 years, 20 years, 15 years, and I'm sort of the Pied Piper around the set, whenever they would bring their kids around, because I had four kids of my own and I used to teach and all that. So, their kids would come and hang around me, and they would go, oh, no, 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 leave Bird alone. He's got work to do. And I'd be like, no, 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 he's fine, and
Yeah.
I'd set him up in my dressing room. It's like, here's, watch these cartoons, or, I keep crayons and stuff in there. I love comic books. So I would have comic books sitting there in my dressing room. And so the kids loved hanging around me. Well, now I look at these kids and they're in their 20s. And I'm like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
The heck did that happen? But so that's the way it is with this whole Judge Judy thing, man. You're right. 25 years has been like, wow,
Yeah.
I was so much younger and more dashing when I started this,
You always come across as very, very serious on screen as well. Like, but from like following you outside of it and looking at your YouTube stuff, which we'll go into in a little bit, Like you come across as a really serious guy. Like, so for people even to see you like this, they'll be kind of, I suppose, surprised. But in terms of Judy herself, like I'm sure she's the exact same. Probably a nice person, like not the real strict woman that we see. Like
Not really. No, I'm
strict
just
in terms of the job.
I'm just kidding. She has, she has a great sense of humor. She's she's really now she's no pussycat. She's no pushover by any stretch of the imagination, man. Like people used to ask me, say, what's she like? When the cameras are not rolling, and I used to tell them, the old comedian Flip Wilson used to say, what you see is what you get. And that's exactly what it is with Judy. What you see is what you get, and so the sternness that's there, the caring that's there, the sense of humor, the Joan River-esque cutting wit. It's all her. That's why it's funny. It's funny when she tries to tell a joke. That's the worst time for her. She always looks at me and goes, "Look at that! I can't get a smile out of him." And that's because I'm laughing all the other times when you're not trying to make a joke, when it's just a natural witticism off the top of your head. That's when I find her the most humorous at the top of her game. So, but as for me, I am man, listen, I am probably the least serious person on the planet, man. All my friends who know me, they would look and they would see me on Judge Judy and they would go, now that's acting. That's him acting. That guy is a total nut.
So Judy is herself, but you're the actor. Is that what you're saying? That's
pretty much it. What they used to say the difference between Batman and Superman. Batman is he puts on the cape and the mask and all that kind of stuff, to go from Bruce Wayne to become Batman. Clark Kent takes off the glasses and takes off the suit, and that's when he becomes who he is, Superman.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the way it is for me and Judy. I am probably the least like Officer Byrd, even though I am Byrd, and she is the most like Judge Judy, because that's exactly who she is. There's no faking.
Is there any memorable moments, or just we'll say like memorable moments like there can be? We'll say, I'll just ask you, what's the funniest thing that you've ever seen happen in the courtroom on the show?
It's actually on YouTube, and I'm always laughing at it because it is a moment that shows her sense of humor, and it also shows just how she can cut through to the chase, and it's a case where the two defendants are accused of breaking into the car of this young woman and stealing her purse or whatever, and so Judge Judy asked the young lady what was in her purse, and she's kind of going down the laundry list of things that were in her purse, and there was a makeup kit, and there was my phone, and there was $60, and the guy kind of chimes in and goes, there was no $60 in there. And the judge just looks at me and goes, don't you just love it? And we have a saying between us, man. It's like, she'll just look at me and go like, shooting fish in a barrel, It's like, really, So it's fun. That's always been my favorite over the years, and it is It is probably our quickest case. It's probably the fastest case we've ever done. But man, you just love it, and she loves that. She loves when she gives you enough rope and you just go ahead and throw it around your neck a few times and
Yeah.
yank.
Yeah, the guy really shot himself in the foot, so to speak, there anyway.
Oh, yeah. You know, and, and he was, it's like, that's when you look and you go, you're too stupid to live.
But
You
it's
are
prime time. That's prime time television right there.
That's it, man. That's
Yeah.
it. It's say, you know what? You, my friend, are what our cases are made of. without, without, without your level of intelligence, I don't know where we'd be.
Yeah. In terms of being on television, then, say for you, did you find like in your normal life that people would recognize you from the show, and did that affect your life in any way? Like the kind of, we'll say, the fame from it.
You know, um, uh, so Samuel L. Jackson is a friend of mine, and
Yeah.
we were talking about this one time. We were at a mutual friend's house at a party, and I said, man, I said, dude, I said, what is it like, not being able to go any place without somebody recognizing you? And he said, man, Samuel L. Jackson, man, some motherfucking pain. He said that's why I use the word MF so much, man. He said,
Yeah.
because it's one of the freedoms that I have to exact from being famous. He said, so I say what I wanna, and I laugh because for me, most people, I don't think most people recognize me out of uniform.
Mm.
So I will be at a function, or I'll be sitting next to somebody in the Department of Motor Vehicles, online at the grocery store,
Yeah.
and and they will say, they'll look at me, you know.
Yeah.
I had one situation where I was standing behind somebody, and the checker knew me. The clerk was dealing with him at the time, but she knew me, so she looked past the gentleman who was in front of her, and she said, "Hey, Bird, how, no, I don't even know if she said, 'Hey, Bird.' She just looked and she
Yeah.
went, 'Hey, what's up? How you doing?' She said, 'Did you remember to get flowers? Because I would always buy flowers for my wife, you know.'"
Yeah.
And so you remember to get flowers? I go,
Mm.
yeah, I get flowers. And as soon as I said that, the gentleman in front of me turned around, right? And he looks and he goes, "Bird?" And I go, "Yeah." And he says, "Oh," he goes, "I knew I recognized that voice." And I'm like, recognize that voice? Like I say the same thing. And then I had to think about it. I'm like, I say the same thing all the time. But not only that, in certain people's world, I say it
Mm-hmm.
every day to them, you know. And so they or they hear me say, "Parties are excused, you may step out." Just that gives them the vocal quality. And so when they hear me say something else, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other hand, there are times when people are staring at me, you know. I remember one time I was in the airport, and uh, this woman kept staring at me, right? And so, I don't say anything. If you know who I am, I won't lie. That's what I used to tell my kids all the time. My kids used to go, "Daddy, when we go somewhere, can you just tell them that you're not the bailiff on Judge Judy?" I go, "No, I won't lie." I said, "I won't lie." I said, "But I'll try to fend them off. If they don't ask me, I won't say." But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, this lady's looking at me in the airport, and all of a sudden, a little kid, he couldn't have been more than 4 years old, 3, 4 years old. He comes over to me and he stands and he looks up at me like this. And I go, "Yes." And He goes, my mommy says you're the guy on Judge Judy.
Yeah.
I said, you go back and tell your mommy that I might be a kidnapper and I might snatch you and take you away. Don't touch it. I said, you tell her to come over and say something. So he goes back to her and he tells her, whatever he can remember that I told him. And she comes over to me and she's all apologetic. I said, but miss, I said, here we are in an airport, in a public place, where somebody could snatch your kid and get on a plane and go someplace else.
Hmm.
I said, all you have to do is say, hey, are you Byrd on Judge Judy? And I said, yeah. So she says to him, she says, but he knows you. She said, that's why he walked over to you. She said, I didn't send him. He knows you. She said, I'll prove it. She calls him over and she says, whatever his name was, Jamal. She goes,
Hmm.
who's that? And she points to me. And he looks and he stands there and he goes, he t- and all I could do, all I could do was laugh,
Oh.
because I went, yeah, he knows me. He didn't have to say a word, just a patented move, step forward.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, so the recognition, um, um, to have had, and this is not for bragging rights, but this is more so to keep into perspective
Hmm.
what happened to me when I got this job. Um, there have been people that I've watched their movies, I've listened to their music, I've watched their stand-up routines, that I just admire,
Hmm.
and my wife will tell you I am the biggest fan on the planet of anybody who's in a movie that I love, or that who makes music that I listen to all the time. And when I meet these people, when I get the opportunity to meet these people, and they tell me how big a fan of theirs I am, I'm like, you're kidding. I mean,
Hmm.
all I do is, step forward, shuffle some papers, do whatever I do. And I remember a pretty famous friend of mine said, "Nah, man." He said, "You don't understand, man. You're our hero." He said, "Man, you've been doing this for 25 years." He
Hmm.
said, "And you act just like you're not even on TV." And I go, "Yeah, because the only time I see me on TV is when I'm in the doctor's office and they happen to be playing Judge Judy." And somebody always looks over at me like, "But anybody ever told you you look like that guy?" Yeah, I've heard that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your YouTube show that you've been doing with your wife
Oh,
since
wow.
Judge Judy is finished, and how is it going for you?
Well, so just after COVID started, like okay, so my wife is a producer on our show, and to answer your next question, your next natural question, yes, I met her on the show, and I remember I said, "The Lord is my shepherd, and I see what I want," but so, but
uh,
but my wife, so when COVID season hit, my wife. I'm going to tell you now. Are you married?
yep,
Okay.
just since last July. Yeah,
Congratulations, man. Congratulations.
yeah.
Here's what I hope for you more than anything. I mean, I hope she's beautiful. I hope she's a great cook. I hope that she protects you, like a lioness. Okay. But the thing I most hope for you is that she makes you laugh.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Bruh, bruh. If I could get guys to get that, you know, for all the, oh, she's beautiful, she's gorgeous, she's in a great shape, she's, and she cooks and she, my wife makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And so what happened behind, once COVID hit, and we were on furlough from last March. March 11th was our March 11th, 2020 was our last day until I think we went back to work something like August 25th. But during that time, she made me laugh so much. We've always done these little videos, whenever we travel somewhere, we get on a plane, we start goofing around, we start making each other laugh. And our favorite thing was to videotape, to do these selfie videos.
Yeah.
And whenever we would show them to somebody, they would just fall out laughing, And like I said, I've done stand up, so I'm a pretty good judge of what makes people laugh, and how to deliver it, timing and all that kind of stuff. And so we decided to start doing. On social media they have Man Crush Mondays and Flashback Fridays, Throwback Thursdays, all that. And so one day I told her, I said, what they don't have a what I call a Tinking Tuesday, man. Tiki Tuesday. You got to tink on Tuesday, man.
Yeah.
So I would do these rants and I would post them up on Tuesday. And everybody got used to seeing them. I made a collection of quite a few of them, And my wife said, you do that rant and everything. She said, we should go on Instagram Live and just start talking.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. So at first we started talking and just talking to each other. And that became funny because people looked at us sort of like Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, like she's my wife is 27 years younger than I am. And so this May December romance of ours, it's positive and it's wonderful in that opposites attract and everything, and that's wonderful. But it also is fodder for things that make you laugh and things that make you go because what I get she doesn't get a lot of times, and vice versa. So we just started doing that on Tuesdays, on Tuesday evenings on Instagram. And then somebody said, hey, what, you guys should be on YouTube, and a friend of mine was telling us, I've seen some stuff on YouTube, man, that really, really sucks, but, they got a great audience because they're there, and people, and they're famous. And it's like, Bird, everybody knows you. So, you guys just take it on YouTube. So we took our act and put it on YouTube, and our audience is growing and growing, and we have a fun time doing it, so we just do hot topics. So we talk about, things that are going on, things that you usually would find on TMZ or CNN or whatever. We discuss some serious issues sometimes, but most of the time we just discuss like the craziness that's going on in the world. And then I started getting famous friends of mine to come on and and be interviewed, and that's how it was born. So her last name is Bond. I thought it should be Miss Moneypenny, but and mine is Bird naturally. So we called the show Bonding with Bird.
It works.
And yeah, and we have. I don't know if you've seen it, but we just have fun, and we did a series of vlogs. Just everyday things. So Christmas shopping or cooking a meal. We had a little cooking challenge with chicken wings and.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we try to keep it lighthearted, and we try to keep it relatively short. You know, we know that the attention span of the average human being has dropped down now
Mhm.
considerably. So,
Yeah.
so if you can keep them engaged for 5 solid minutes, you know, you're good to go.
Yeah. And that's out every Tuesday now, isn't it?
Yes, every Tuesday, um, 6 Pacific time. It's California time. Uh, and but it's funny because we have a worldwide audience, and so it's always fun to hear from people from Ireland and England and Australia and France, and you know, and when people come in and tell us where they're from, it's like, really? You
Mhm.
know, it must not be much to do there.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you anyway today, and it was great to have you on the show. And best of luck